presidential race since we last spoke is that the race has tightened. My data is showing now a 2-point lead that Hillary Clinton has over Donald Trump, and Gary Johnson continues to inch up in the polls to where now the aggregate of polling I have for the last 7 days is showing Gary Johnson getting 9%, which is getting ever closer to the threshold necessary to be able to participate in the debates. What I think is fueling the narrowing of the race, which in fact is being replicated in the swing states as well, where Donald Trump is rapidly closing the gap in Florida and Iowa, Nevada, and other states. What is causing this, in my opinion, are several things. Number one, Donald Trump has been largely gaffe-free. Number two, Hillary Clinton made her own version of Mitt Romney's 47% remark by basically saying that half of Donald Trump's supporters are racist. Very bad thing to do, regardless of what party you're in. It's a very bad practice to disparage the supporters of your opponent. The other thing that Hillary Clinton did is her pneumonia/overheating spell at the 9/11 memorial all of a sudden, I think, blew back on her in a very bad way. One of the worst things in politics that you could have happen to you, in my opinion, is if a preconceived notion that voters have of you gets amplified by your behavior or your deeds. And that, in fact, and so what I'm referring to here is the Clintons have a penchant for secrecy and parsing everything that they say. And so you have polling that shows that people do not view Hillary Clinton as trustworthy. And so there are all kinds of questions that were swirling around about her health due to her cough and, pictures of her needing some assistance and getting in and out of the car and so forth. Well, when this overheating spell occurred Sunday, and then it was revealed that this was something that had been diagnosed several days before the incident occurred, it kind of brought back the old stereotype about the Clintons having something to hide, not being completely truthful. It reminds me a lot of the reputation, whether deserved or not, of Mitt Romney being elitist. And that was amplified when, he was talking about his car elevator and the fact that he only knew the NASCAR owners, and it culminated with the infamous 47% remark 4 years ago. So I see a lot of similarities between Hillary Clinton's overheating and all of the stories about Mitt Romney. In other words, it's the publicity she does not need at this point in time as we get closer to the debates.
Sure, absolutely. Now, I happen to look at a couple of polls. I'll try to pull them up if you haven't seen them. And basically, okay, there's a Bloomberg poll, and that poll indicates that, actually that poll was taken up in Ohio.
Yes.
Taken from Friday to, I think, Monday.
Okay.
So it included the gaffe, and it also included the situation in terms of the fainting spell. And so what happened is it shows a 5-point lead for Donald Trump.
Right.
That's pretty strong. Because as you know, Ohio is not only is it the swing state, but it is the state that predicts, I think ever since 1964, that state has the winner of that state has won the presidency. So I think that's big news. Secondly, Maine, which was leaning towards Hillary Clinton, is now, as I appreciated, within 3 points.
Yes.
And lastly, there was another poll that showed that the Hispanics, that Trump is really having problems with Hispanics in the swing states. So those are the 3 polls I saw today.
Right.
Your response.
So typically, I don't like to get excited about individual polls. I like to look at a basket of polls and kind of look at the results in the aggregate, because there was a tweet I saw this morning that in the same breath that talked about the 5-point Trump lead in Ohio, there was another poll that showed Hillary Clinton with a 5-point lead. So in other words, there's a lot of different ways you can look at this. what I like to do is let a week's time pass by, and I look at all the polls taken together and see what's happened. And if I have the good fortune of pollster ABC doing the same poll in the same state that he or she did a couple of weeks ago,
Sure.
then I get a really good trend line. So the 5-point lead for Trump and the 3-point deficit in Maine are certainly newsworthy. I'd like to see additional polling. I will say this, though. You had mentioned about the field dates of the Ohio poll and how it spanned the incidents that Hillary Clinton was involved in. Anytime something unfavorable happens towards a candidate, I'm a firm believer of the lag effect, meaning that typically you start to see what happens in the week after that. Because, of course, it takes time, number one, for the charges to sink in. And number two, even once the charges have begun to sink in, you have to allow for time for the pollster to go out in the field, do his work, and do the write-up and publish it. So that all those factors contribute to the lag I'm talking about. And a perfect example of this, we're getting into the weeds here, but when you're talking about something that I very much love to do, I get very low in the grass, so to speak. But when we're talking about the lag time, this really manifested itself recently when Kaiser Khan made his infamous remarks near the end of the Democratic convention. There was no immediate impact to Donald Trump because there was still the buzz, so to speak, from the Republican convention the week before that. But the week after the Democratic convention, we started seeing the numbers move towards Hillary Clinton in a very major way. And so where I'm going with this is that with regards to the gaffes and so forth that have hit Hillary Clinton in the last few days, we're going to start seeing the results for good or for ill throughout this week. And so if, let's pretend for a second, the polling I have is current as of last night, and in the aggregate, looking at the last 7 days, it shows a 2-point Donald Trump deficit. If, let's pretend for a second, we start going out another 7 days, and the 4-point deficit that Trump once had, which is now 2 points, and all of a sudden is a dead even race,
Right.
can conclude that there has been further erosion in Clinton's support. And so, like I said, those polls you mentioned are interesting, but I like to look at the aggregate picture before I start making judgment calls, because as you can appreciate, there's been a lot of back and forth in this race. Back in early June, when Donald Trump was making snarky remarks about the judge in Indiana who he didn't feel that he could get a fair hearing from, and he criticized the Republican governor of New Mexico, and then 2 months later, he was picking on Kaiser Khan's wife. Those were the low points in the Trump campaign, whereas Hillary Clinton right now is having a low point as well. So there's going to be a lot of topsy-turvy, but what makes it all very interesting, in addition to the fact the debates are around the corner, is that now we have the additional overlay of elections occurring. In other words, North Carolina sent out its absentee ballots last Friday. As of this morning, 355 people have already returned their ballots. So those votes are in the can, so to speak, for either Trump or Clinton. And then that 355 number, of course, not only will go up as we get closer to the election, but Alabama starts sending out absentee ballots tomorrow. And on September 23rd, you have true early voting in Minnesota and Iowa and several other states. So you have all of this going on as Trump or Clinton are making their case to the voters.